in Las Vegas. That is where USC began its Big Ten era with a 27-20 win against LSU. A lot of different ways to pick this apart. But I'll let you get first word. What'd you think about this lock fight loss?
I want to talk more about USC, right? Like USC came out for 2 years. They had looked like a joke on defense. We've talked about it. Like, what do these guys do in practice? Do they hit? Do they tackle? Like the assignments they miss are egregious. USC was competent. They had that defense installed. Like, credit to D'Anton Lynn. I think he did a great job for them. They did not allow any sort of blown coverage and freebies over at the top. Most of the passes they allowed were in like the short to intermediate range. And when they did, they tackled really well. I thought they played pretty good anticipatory defense as well. Whereas, like, look, we know we're going to allow the ball underneath, but they were moving on them, pretty quickly. And I thought Nussmeier played really well, but USC effectively played what we like to call in this show red zone roulette. Like, that was good. We're going to allow you to drive down the field somewhat, and then we hope that we will force more field goals than touchdowns in the red zone. And they actually got one red zone stop, just an outright stop, which was awesome. Like, that was much better. They also, in the first half, I thought did a pretty good job of confusing some of LSU's run game stuff, where USC would get movement LSU would get movement when they knew the right person to block. But oftentimes, like, you saw guys kind of doubling when I don't think there's supposed to be a double there, and allowed somebody else to come over the top, which was free. So nice job. USC appears to figure out how to practice and be a little more physical. That's what we've been asking for. Everybody gave me a bunch of crap for putting Lincoln Riley down in my coaching rankings, but personally, I didn't think I had any other choice based on how they were regressing every year. I think he's got it right. Next year, if this continues, he's going way back up because the offense was great. 10.5 yards per attempt for Miller Moss. We roasted LSU's ass all offseason for not using the transfer portal to fix that defense. Got a trivia question for you guys.
Ooh. How
many quarterbacks last year against Power 5 teams threw for more than 10.5 yards per attempt?
I already know the answer, so I'll let Chip and Danny go. You guys don't know?
No.
It was Jaden Daniels who played for LSU.
That's the only one who did it?
Congrats, LSU. You allowed a Heisman-worthy performance in terms of yards per attempt. Now, you played some red zone roulette too, but 10.5 yards per attempt allowed is egregious. Miller Moss played well. These LSU DBs, they're bad, man. And to me, I think Nussmeier's awesome. I think the O-line's awesome. I think they wasted an opportunity. So,
I mean, I was very pleased with the USC defense. They gave up a lot of yards, but like you're saying, it was by design, and it was nice to see USC actually have a defensive design. And what was ballsy about it was not only was it the red zone roulette, but to play red zone roulette, like you said, you've got to be able to tackle, because that's the only way you're going to keep people from making big plays against you if you're trying to keep everything in front. And they actually tackled. So I was very, very enthusiastic and pleasantly surprised what I saw from that USC defense, obviously outside of locking up the over in the game where the red zone roulette kind of killed me. But I think it's an encouraging start. Miller Moss looked really good. Like, maybe Lincoln Riley does know what he's doing with quarterbacks. And like Bud said, maybe he needs to be up a little higher than 30th in the 65 Power 5 coach rankings.
I deserve that for sure.
Maybe Brian Kelly needs to go down a little further. It's weird. I think if I'm LSU, I don't think last night was terrible for LSU. I think you were in a good game against a good team and you just came up short in the end. I don't think it's going to be a disastrous season. I do find it funny that they've won 5 straight home openers. If I am Brian Kelly, I am going to my athletic director and saying, who do they play next week year in the season opener? It's Clemson. Yeah. We need to cancel that game, and we need to schedule Alabama A&M, somebody that we could just beat 63-0 to make everybody feel happy for a week.
I agree with everything you guys said. I feel better about both teams. Clearly you're going to feel good about USC. I didn't know what we're going to get from LSU. I've heard a lot about stuff about Garrett Nussmeier, and the Garrett Nussmeier show was on display in the first half. And it was like this coronation of, here's one Heisman to the next, and here's your next great quarterback. And yet Miller Moss was going toe to toe. And I thought on the night overall, I thought Miller Moss was the better quarterback. I thought he was under more duress, more pressure situations, made even tighter throws. They were both awesome, but I thought Miller Moss outplayed him at the end. I think the one thing that I looked at, because we've talked about this a lot, and I remember having this conversation being like, well, they can bring in all these coaches. They can bring in Danton Lynn. They can bring in Matt Entz. They can bring in, a new defensive mind, but it's not the players that they've changed. And maybe I undersold, and they covered it in the game last night, but I had read it before about them adding 1,400 pounds of bulk, this offseason in the training and conditioning. I think there's something to that. They looked physical. They looked like they could go toe to toe. I don't know what drills they did to improve tackling, but they wrapped up and tackled guys in the open field, like one-on-one tackles. There were a couple that looked like touchdown saving tackles that were really solid. I thought both teams played really well. I thought it was the game of the weekend. And that's what my overall lasting impression was like. I feel better about both teams. Because I feel like a lot of the questions were answered. And I know it doesn't make LSU fans feel any better, but you got what you wanted out of Garrett Nussmeier. You saw an improved defense, which I think is clearly much better. I think there's some criticism clearly of the way Brian Kelly handled the late game situations. There's some other things, but I think overall I feel better about both teams because I wasn't a big believer that either one were really a contender. And I definitely think USC is a contender in the Big Ten, especially from what we saw out of Oregon and Michigan. And LSU, I would say I was very iffy on them. I think they could go toe-to-toe with anybody, probably outside of Georgia, that I feel like, and maybe even Georgia, they could go toe-to-toe with. So I feel better about both teams. That was kind of my takeaway.
I do think it's important to point out, how hard USC played. Those kids are bought into what that staff is doing. I thought that was evident on the field. They did do a nice job in the portal with the DBs. They took two kids from UCLA. They took one kid from Florida State. Those guys, they're not amazing, but they are definitely better than what USC did last year. And some of the stuff USC used to run just didn't make any sense structurally. And okay, if you have Ed Reed, great. That, I recommend doing stuff like that. But if you don't, just run a reasonably competent defense and tackle and play hard. And their fundamentals just look so much better. So for them to pull that off in one offseason, I'm stunned, but I'm super impressed. That is great.
I know of another defense that seems to think they have Ed Reed at safety. But anyways, back to this game. I will say, USC, there's going to be a lot of hype about, clearly a big win to start the season over LSU. You're going to hype it up. Expectations are raised. We were all very impressed by Miller Moss. The one aspect of the game that concerns me going forward with Miller Moss, we have seen Lincoln in the past, whether it was Baker, Jalen, Kyler, Caleb, guys who are big but not overly tall. They did a really good job of moving them out of the pocket when things weren't there. Miller Moss had a lot of passes batted down last night. And to me, that could be a problem going forward because he's not a statue, but he's not nearly as mobile in my estimation as those other guys. So it'll be interesting to see if they start figuring out ways to get him moving out of the pocket to get him, open up some passing lanes because that could be a problem going into the conference play.
And a lot of those defenses than LSU for sure.
Yeah. And a lot of those batted passes almost got picked. There were a few. I don't know what the count was, but it felt like there were 5. There might only been 3, but they were definitely getting after that. And you're right, Tom, if defenses start to notice that, I would rather get crushed after I threw the ball and got it out than have a tipped ball, batted ball. That used to piss me off so bad. And at some point, defenses will start just sitting there trying to bat it down. And they'll really take a concerted effort in doing that. So that is definitely something they need to be aware of.
So Brian Kelly made himself a little highlight in the post-game press conference. And before we get that rolling, what I like when those moments happen is to go back to the beginning of the press conference because coaches don't often jump right into that. They normally lather themselves up, and then there's the moment that ends up getting clipped and put on TVs all over the place. And so I went back to the very beginning. And the thing that Brian Kelly would not stop saying is we got inside the 15-yard line 3 times and came away with 6 points, and that was unacceptable. And then this is, quote, we put way too much on our defense to be something they aren't ready to be. They battled, but we have warts, and they're not getting better overnight. He pointed to the fact that the 2 personal fouls that led to USC scores came from veterans, came from players that Brian Kelly and this staff count on to be team leaders. Brian Kelly seems to act like this was the worst possible result, given the way that a lot of other things had gone. if they didn't have 10 penalties and a couple of them being incredibly damaging. Now that said, hey, let's hear from Brian Kelly.
Coach, is it disappointing when you have, Savion Jones kind of really rose up, Aaron Anderson, John Emery, they kind of put you in position? Is it disappointing when those guys perform and you don't get a victory?
Hell yes. Hell yes. I mean, and that's what I said to the team. I said, we had some guys played their butts off tonight, and we're sitting here again. We're sitting here again talking about the same things, about not finishing when you have an opponent in a position to put them away. But what we're doing on the sideline is feeling like the game's over. And I'm so angry about it that I got to do something about it. I'm not doing a good enough job as a coach. And I got to coach him better, because it's unacceptable for us not to have found a way to win this football game. It's ridiculous. And it's crazy.
Listen, Brian Kelly got a lot of heat for that, but I will say at least he was able to open that bottle of water.
Yes.
Why did Brian Kelly really get heat for that?
Yeah. I mean, he's Brian Kelly. He's going to get made. He's a meme. He's a walking meme on college football Twitter, period.
Fair.
You guys totally felt that was like prepped in advance, right? Like I felt yes, like I'm gonna go in there and at some point I'm gonna slam my fist on the table and I'm gonna send a message to my players. I think he wanted it to feel spontaneous. Like, I'm just getting really upset right now, but it felt way like staged.
I'm telling you, as watching 745 until he got to that point, he just kept repeating the same things he was frustrated about. And the reporters kept asking the same questions. He gave the same answer for the things that he thought was wrong. He said, you have to be a steely-eyed killer in this sport, and we're not that. I mean, he's criticizing whether the dog is in them. Like he probably
more authentic.
I don't think it was authentic, because I would never claim Brian Kelly as like the center of authenticity. But I am saying that from watching the entire press conference as a whole, it is very clear that he believes that this team played well enough and a lot of the players played well enough that they should have gotten a different result. And it was all the intangible stuff. It was all the stuff between the ears. It wasn't X's and O's. He felt like the defense was more connected. You know, he felt like they did a good enough job, given the personnel that they have, to be able to win the football game. And dumbassery is the thing that has him sitting with a 5th straight loss in a season opener.
I think what Brian Kelly really needed was a friend in that press conference to ask him what he thought about his team's execution, so he could get that joke off and just, lighten the mood.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like Lincoln, and I get the record of openers. Don't you think Lincoln Riley needed that game way more than Brian Kelly? Just because of all the stuff about him wanting to get out of the game. He didn't want to go in the SEC. And then he was upset about the Big Ten. Now, criticism that he's taken, I feel like he needed that game more. And he got it.
To steal a bit from another podcast, I will say for Lincoln Riley, that was a must win. But for Brian Kelly, it was a can't lose.
I like that.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think I agree with Danny on that. I also wonder if Brian Kelly is mad at himself.
Yeah, probably.
Like, I don't know that I'm ready to say that Joe Sloan is a major downgrade from Mike Denbrock as a play caller. It's his first game as a play caller on this type of stage. But I also don't know that he's not a downgrade. But how much is Kelly involved in this offense with a guy who was previously just a really good quarterback coach, and now he is the OC? I thought USC did a great job of baiting LSU into running the ball in the fourth quarter, especially on first down. USC sold out like crazy to stop the run. Do you know that LSU had a 0% success rate rushing the football on first down in the fourth quarter? They were putting themselves behind, like, throw the ball. Nussmeier is going to be a high draft pick. You need to lean on that kid. USC's not covering you all that well. Like, maybe they're not giving up the explosives, but I thought they're just being that hard-headed. Like, you guys are not running the ball that well today. Like, for whatever reason, whether it's confusion or whatever, but also operationally. Both teams struggled with some of the substitutions. I think Riley in the fourth quarter, like, they had to take 2 timeouts because they were still running personnel on and trying to change stuff. But LSU consistently was just not smooth looking out of the huddle. And so I wonder how much that'll improve over the course of the season. But they got to throw the ball. Like, you got a lot of good receivers on that team. You got a really good quarterback. Their passing success rate is way higher. And just the sticking to the run killed them.
I will say, like, I think last night we did see evidence. Like last year, I don't think LSU's run game was that good last year either. I think the run game was just Jaden Daniels for the most part, like running and picking up huge chunk yardage. I don't think when they were actually just dropping, handing off and going, they were all that spectacular. But I do think last night we saw the impact, especially in the red zone, of not having Jaden Daniels who can really use his legs, as a threat and cause defenses to be able to defend you differently. And then outside of the red zone, like I like Kyron Lacey a lot. I was talking about him last spring when I was watching the Jaden Daniels tape, and I just fell in love with him. But there's no Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas on that team. The receivers might be good, but it's a lot different when you don't have those two roaming wide open against every secondary that they face because they're so damn fast. So
the speed threat with Hilton, I think they missed. Like, he didn't play. That could be what they needed somebody to take the top off a little bit better. But also, you could take the top off by running some play action. Like how much cover 4 are you getting there? How many posts did LSU try? Like, did they try any deep overs? I mean, at some point, with
USC was just dropping everything back. It just wasn't there. Yeah.
Like, when I watched it, I was like, okay, at some point, USC is going to bluff a smoke screen and go up, and they did. And they threw it to the H back, which was kind of cool. But LSU was jumping some of these little screens so fast, and they did. And they hit like a 25-yarder off it. LSU never threw that deep, like they never really tried that hard play action for the deep stuff.
I do think, though, and Tom was pointed out, and I thought Herbstreit was pointed out during the game, I think they were playing that 4 umbrella coverage, keep them all in front of you because this is a big play, explosive offense that thrives off that. Let's give them the short underneath stuff. And they were like nervous. That's why it was so wide open. Those little quick outs and the 10-yard, hitches and stuff like that was wide open. I think that was very much a plan. And it was that whole bend, don't break. And then when the throws get tighter, we step up, and they did.
I just okay. In the fourth, you ran the ball decently in the third quarter. And just every first down that was 1st and 10 in the fourth, just run. Like, I don't know, try to kill a shot, but that's like Monday morning quarterbacking, obviously.
It literally is.
It was a Sunday, we usually it's Sunday morning.
Yeah, the Kyron Lacey is an alien. He's awesome, but
he's a character. That is 1,000% for sure.
I did think.
How about the aliens for USC though? Zachariah Branch, when he's running the catch of the year from Hudson, there was some play. Like, that's the thing too. Like, they had some playmakers. That's why I do think all of a sudden I talked to Petros Papadakis in LA. Yes! He does LA radio. Petros, he's a great dude.
He's phenomenal.
We were previewing this game, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I don't know what I'm going to get out of either one of these teams. And we were talking USC specific, and I said, I could go down. I think, Chip, you've said this before too. I could go down and talk myself into wins on a lot of games, but a lot of it hinges on how do they look. But one of the things was if they beat LSU, all of a sudden that game against Michigan feels like gettable. And then after what we saw out of Michigan, it's like, okay, that feels like they could actually win that thing. And then you start going down. It's like that Penn State game at home. I know Penn State was more explosive, but USC's defense looked a lot better. Like, all of a sudden, I know we have to be careful because we don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Oh, let's get ahead of ourselves. I hear 10-2.
Yeah, I was going to say, Danny tells USC winning the Big Ten.
All right. Here's one
me and Colin Cowherd. But what you don't, like, I do think legitimately, I feel like, because it was the 4 teams and then the gap. I think USC is in the 5 teams and then the gap.
I agree. Is the Big Ten's best 5 better than the SEC's best 5?
I mean,
I
tweeted it
to tell, but because Michigan did not look good. So, like, are they? I think it's
there's still such a high floor for Michigan because who can block them,
right?
Like
Fresno
Texas
State
may be able to.
In the last, as currently constructed, in the last 3 games between the Big Ten and the SEC that mattered, not like bowl games, but the playoff and the regular season, USC's beaten LSU, Michigan's beaten Alabama, and Washington beat Texas. Just saying.
Like, if you say like the top 9, the SEC is clearly deeper there
for sure.
But the top 5, I don't know. We'll see.
George, so
I'd still lean SEC.
Do you include LSU in the top 5?
No, not after how their DBs played.
Okay.
That's way too many busts.
Well, who are we considering then? Georgia, Alabama,
Texas.
Tennessee, Texas,
Ole
Ole
Miss.
Miss?
and Ole Miss.
I think it's SEC, but it is closer than we thought it was a week ago.
Yes. That's
Well,
a
we'll
good way.
find out.
Well,
find
it's
out
also-
with Texas, Michigan, how one of these stacks up.
It's also tough to really do at this point because, like, yeah, Georgia smoked Clemson, but the rest of those teams all played FCS competition for the most part, whereas those top 5 in the Big Ten were at least playing FBS opponents.